Okay, so now let's talk about decimals. Okay, so this is a place value chart. I'm hoping everybody has seen one of these before. So what you need to realize is that there is a ones place just immediately to the left of the decimal, but there is no oneths place immediately to the right. It starts with tenths. So just make sure that you don't get that mixed up, okay? So the decimal, though, whenever we're saying things in words, the decimal is the word and. It's the only time that you will say the word and whenever you're talking about, whenever you're naming a number. Okay, so you may want to hit pause here and read through this. Okay, so we're going to name the decimal 4.3. And in normal English language, 4.3 is a perfectly fine way to say it. But if you want to say it the proper way, you would put the 4 there, the decimal is in the middle, and then 3 goes right there. So how you say that, you don't say 4 ones, you just say 4. So you would say 4 and 3 tenths. That is the proper way to say this. All right, so now we're going to name the decimal negative 15.571. We're going to name it properly this time. So negative 15 and then 571 goes to the right of the decimal. So notice where that 1 ends up. That 1 ends up on the thousandths place. So here's how you say this. You say negative 15 and 571 thousandths. You have to say the last place where a number is. 571 thousandths. And I know that we really want to say 571 thousandths. That's not correct. Remember, you don't say the and except where a decimal is. So negative 15 and 571 thousandths. Okay, again, this might be a place where you want to hit pause and read through this. All right, so on this one, we are going to write 14 and, that's where my decimal goes right there, 24 thousandths. So I want 14 on the left. I want the decimal where the and is. Now, I want the 24, I want that 4 to end up in the thousandths place. So I need that 4 to be in the third decimal place. That means I've got to fill in that blank right there. So I'm going to fill it in with a blank. So the proper way to write this in numerals is 14.024. A lot of people make a mistake and say 14.240, and that's wrong. Don't do that. Okay, I'm going to strongly urge you to stop and read through this. So many people have a tough time with rounding, and it's really not nearly as hard as people make it out to be. So please take some notes on this, and please, before you move on to the next math class, know how to round properly. All right, so now we're going to round 18.379, or you could say 18 and 379 thousandths to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so I'm just rewriting the number. I want to round it to this place right here. Here's the hundredths place. I have to look at this number right here and decide if I round that 7 up or if I just leave it alone and drop everything afterwards. So if this number right here is 5 or greater, then I round that 7 up to an 8. So since it's a 9, I'm going to round it up. And this is rounded to the nearest hundredth place. Okay, so now I'm going to round 18.379 to the nearest tenths place. So 18.379, I want to round it to this place I just underlined. I've got to look at the number immediately to the right of it. Since that number immediately to the right is greater than 5, then I round that 3 to a 4, and I drop everything else. So 18.4 is rounded to the nearest tenths place. Now if I want to round this to the nearest whole number, that means I want to round that 8. Either leave it alone or round it up. But I have to look at this 3 to determine that. Since that 3 is less than 5, I just drop everything. So the nearest whole number is 18. Okay, again, this is a place where you might want to hit pause and read through this. Okay, so to add decimals, you need to line up your decimal. So if I have 23.5 and I want to add to it 41.38, this is where you have to be like uber neat. And if you don't line them up properly, you won't ever get the correct answer. Again, my preference is to just grab the calculator and add and subtract, divide and multiply my decimals. But I'm showing you how to do this by hand as well. So you might want to practice both ways, but truly, calculator is fastest and more accurate. Okay, so since I don't have a number there, I'm just going to place a 0 at the end. That 0 does not change the value of this at all. And then you just add from right to left, just like we would any other number. And keep that decimal in the same spot. Bring it straight down. So 0 plus 8 is 8. 5 plus 3 is 8. 3 plus 1 is 4. 2 plus 4 is 6. There you go. There's your answer. Okay, so on this number, remember you're not allowed to subtract in any order, so you have to go in this order. 20, but since I have to line up a decimal, I'm going to put a 0 right there after that 20. And again, line up your decimals. 14.65. And since I don't have any numbers up there, I can put zeros in those positions. And now I need to borrow, just like I would if this were not a decimal. So I'm going to borrow that 1. This becomes 10, but I have to borrow 1, so that becomes 9. That becomes 10, but I have to borrow 1, so that becomes 9. So now I've got 10 minus 5, which is 5. 9 minus 6 is 3. Bring your decimals straight down. 9 minus 4 is 5. 1 minus 1 is 0, and I don't have to write that 0 in the front. So my answer is 5.35. Okay, so for multiplication, you do not have to line up your decimals. But whenever I was younger, I was always taught to put the longer number, or the one with the most number of digits, on top. And for whatever reason, it just seemed easier. You're not really required to do that, but it does seem like there's less places for you to mess up or get out of alignment. So I would put, because this one has more digits, I would put that on top. And then I would put 3.9 on the bottom. Notice how I didn't put that negative sign in the front. The reason why I didn't do that is because I don't want it to look like I'm subtracting. But my final answer, I need to remember that my final answer is going to be negative because I have a negative times a positive. So now I'm just going to go ahead and multiply. 9 times 5 is 45. Carry your 4. 9 times 7 is 63. Plus 4 is 67. 9 times 0, 0 plus 6 is 6. 9 times 4 is 36. Okay, so now again, your placeholder, don't forget that placeholder. And I'm going to mark through those guys. 3 times 5 is 15, carry your 1. 3 times 7 plus 1 is 22, carry your 2. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. 3 times 4 is 12. And then you're going to add those together. Okay, 7 and 5 is 12. 1 plus 6 plus 2 is 9. 6 plus 2 is 8. 3 plus 2 is 5. And there's a 1 there. So now, although these are all the correct digits, I have to put the decimal someplace. So what you do is you count up how many decimal places you have. So I have 4 decimal places that are to the right. I have 4 numbers that are to the right of the decimal place. That means in my answer I need to have 4 numbers that are to the right. So this decimal place would go right here. So the answer is 15.8925, or 15 and 8,925 10,000ths. I almost forgot the negative. You guys almost let me forget the negative. There we go. Sorry, negative 15 and 8,925 10,000ths. Okay, so to multiply by a power of 10, it means to move your decimal to the right, the number of zeros that you have. So on part A, if I multiply 5.63 times 10, I move the decimal because there's 1 0, I move it to the right one place. So this turns into 56.3. Now if I multiply 5.63 by 100, there's 2 zeros, so I scoot it to the right 2 places. So my answer would be 563. To the right 1,000, or multiply by 1,000, I'm sorry, I can't talk. Move it to the right 3 places. So 5.63, move it to the right 1, 2, 3, and I've got to put a 0, a placeholder there. So it would be 5,630. Okay, so whenever you divide decimals, of course the first number, and again, I'm going to ignore my negatives. I want you guys to realize a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So I'm totally going to ignore my negatives throughout this whole process. So I'm going to put 25.56 inside the little box. And I'm going to put 0.06 on the outside of the little box, and we're going to do some long division. But first, when you divide decimals, you are not allowed to divide by a decimal. So you have to scoot this decimal to the right, however many places it would take to make that a whole number. But what you do to the number on the outside, you have to do the exact same thing to the number on the inside. So the decimal is actually right there after that 6. So actually what I'm dealing with is 6 going into 2,556. And that decimal is right there. So 6 won't go into 2, but it will go into 25 4 times. 4 times 6 is 24. Subtract, I got a 1 there, bring that 5 down. 6 will go into 15 twice. 2 times 6 is 12. Subtract, you have a 3 there, bring this 6 down. 6 will go into 36 6 times. So my answer to this problem is 426. You deal with the decimals before you start working with the problem, and then you don't have to deal with the decimal later whenever you're finished. Okay, so if I want to write 0.374 as a fraction, I take what's to the right of the decimal and I put it in the numerator. And what goes in the denominator is a 1, and because there are 3 places there, there are going to be 3 zeros here. And then you always reduce. So if I want to reduce this, let's see here, I'll divide by 2. I don't know if 4 goes in. I'm not even going to waste my time dealing with 4. So I'm going to divide by 2. 187 over 500. And I don't think that that is reducible. Again, I grab my calculator for this and I reduce my fractions on my calculator, especially whenever they're big numbers like this, because I really don't want to deal with it any other way. And I know that the calculator is a lot quicker and a lot more accurate at reducing fractions than I am. Okay, so if I want to turn negative 5/8 into a decimal, what I need to do is I need to divide 8 into 5. And don't forget your answer will be negative. So let's see here, 5 divided by 8. And I know that 8 won't go into 5, so I'm going to have to add some decimal, maybe several zeros here. And you always bring these decimals straight up. So 8 won't go into 5 at all, so I put a 0 there, and I know that my answer is going to be negative. But 8 will go into 50, 6 times? Yeah, 6 times 8 is 48. subtract, and you get 2. 8 will go into 20 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract, you get a 4. I'm going to put another 0 there and bring another 0 down. 8 will go into 40 5 times. So negative 5/8 as a decimal is negative 0.625. Again, using the calculator, so much faster, so much easier, and so much more accurate. We can easily make mistakes on simple multiplication, and you are not alone if you do that. I do it all the time. So that's why I grabbed the calculator. It's your fraction to decimal button. So the button actually says PRB on it. That stands for probability. You're not using that. You're going to use the letters that are just above it that say F, and then it's got 2 arrows and a D. So the second and the PRB button is your fraction to decimal button. And just type it in and hit that button, and it will change it. It will change it either from a fraction to a decimal or vice versa. Okay, so if I want to write 43/22 as a decimal, then what I want to do is I want to divide 22 into 43. And I see that 22 will go into 43 one time without going over. And I'm going to bring down a 0. Okay, then I ask myself, how many times will 22 go into 210? It will go in, I think, 9 times. 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 1 is 19. And I'm going to subtract. And as long as that number is less than 22, I know I got the right number. 2, 1, so 10 minus 9. Yeah, so it's 12. Okay, so now I'm going to bring down another 0. 22 into 120. I think it'll go about 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. And 22 into 100 will go 4 times. 88. Come on now, where am I going to get my repeating decimal at? I'm sure I'm going to get one. There we go. 22 into 120. We already did this. And that was 5. And so this is going to keep going 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4. And so what repeats here is this, that 5, 4, not the 9. So to write this as a decimal would be 1.954 with a bar only above the 5 and the 4. Don't put that bar over the 9 because the 9 does not repeat. So that's how you write a repeating decimal. Again, I would probably just use my calculator and type in 43 divided by 22. It's so much quicker. Okay, so when you see a problem like this, you have to either use fractions or decimals. You have to pick. And so on my calculator, I'm doing 7 divided by 8, and I get a decimal of, so I converted 7/8 into a decimal of 0.875. And since I'm dealing with 6.4, that's probably a little bit easier to deal with. 0.875 plus 6.4, and I'm just putting zeros there. So I've got 5, there's 7, 8 and 4 is 12. Carry the 1, bring your decimal straight down. There's your answer. Okay, so if I convert a percent to a decimal, then that means that I just move the decimal to the left 2 places. So on 62%, my decimal is right here after that 2. And so to convert it to a decimal, I scoot it to the left 2 places. So that's going to be 0.62. That's my final answer. Okay, on 135%, it's right here after the 5, so I have to scoot it to the left 2 places. So that'll put it between the 1 and the 3. So 135% is 1.35 as a decimal. 35.7%, Scoot it to the left 2 places, and I got 0.357 as a decimal. So now if I want to go the other direction, if I want to convert a decimal into a percent, I scoot it to the right 2 places. So this one getting scooted to the right becomes 51%. This becomes 125%. And this becomes 9.3%. All right, so that's it for this video. Have a good day. If you have any questions, send me a message.